What's up, everyone? Welcome into the Dear Miss Fantasy Show with me, your host, Tera Roberts. This is the official mailbag show for Player Profiler. It is Wednesday, November 6th. It's November. My God. It doesn't feel like November here in Houston. It is extremely hot, but it's here. We are over halfway through with the season and we are live. So everybody, welcome in. Say hi in the chat if you're watching live. Today's show is going to be fun. Guys, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to do a little bit of an intro here because I am slightly feeling myself this week. Again, not going to lie. I'm on a bit of a roll recently. As an analyst, like everybody has different processes in terms of how they come up with their rankings and their data. My process is very heavily based on tracking trending things in both offensive and defensive team stats and performances. And that means that early on in the season, sometimes my rankings might be a little bit wild. And that means that as we kind of hit mid-season, everything starts to click. So it is definitely clicking right now. Rankings have been extremely accurate over the past 2 weeks. Player props have been hitting. This Sunday, I hit 9 of 9 on the early games. I should not have touched the Sunday game. I knew better than that, but I couldn't help myself. You hit 9 of 9, and then you start to feel like, okay, fantastic day. Let me throw a little something in here. Dallas. Then 3 of 4 on Monday night game. DFS plays were a hit. So I'm in a good fantasy football mood because it is clicking right now. So go ahead and drop your questions in the chat. We'll be answering all of those. Also, I'm certain that most of you don't know that I do props in DFS, and that's because I don't put up a ton of content on props in DFS. It's a timing issue. Whatever I get paid to do comes first, and those are the things that I'm not paid to do. So I'm working on finding some more time to do that stuff and put it on my YouTube channel because I love creating DFS polls. It's a passion. I do it every week, even if I don't get to put it out, just because it makes me happy. So hopefully I'll have more of that content coming out in the future here as I start to try and craft out more time for myself. Because why not share with everybody? If it's working, share with the people, right? But today's topic, in addition to answering all of your questions, go ahead and drop those. Topic for the show is going to be it's going to be running backs. Going to be running backs, and not just any running backs. We're not talking about like, oh my gosh, we're loving Saquon Barkley. He's amazing, because we already knew that, right? We're talking about mid to late running backs that we drafted that are taking over and evaluating their performances and what to expect from them moving forward. I wrote an article this Sunday on this exact topic. You can find it on my Yahoo writers page. But the guys that we're going to be talking about are Tony Pollard, Chase Brown, and JK Dobbins. JK Dobbins, one of my late round best ball. Oh my gosh, I drafted, I don't even want to tell you how much. JK Dobbins, at the time, it felt a little stupid. But to be fair, I did it well before, the news of him coming back happened. So it was like literally like a second to last round pick in all my best ball drafts. That is definitely paying off. At the time, it was a little bit out there, but it's working out. Those are the 3 guys we'll talk about. If you want to see the other guys that I wrote about in the article, go ahead and check that out on my Yahoo Writers Fantasy page. It is Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard. Obviously, things with Rico have taken a potential turn downward, right? Unfortunately, just because of everything that's going out with Dak. News that came out maybe just like 3 hours ago or so, maybe not even. Recent news that Dak's hamstring injury it's a tear. We're looking at least a 4-week recovery time. We can do the math on that, guys. And we also know how the Dallas season is going as a whole. It's not good, unfortunately. I think I might have talked about this on my last live, potentially, or another. I do so many lives, Jesus Christ. I think it might have been a live Q&A that I did earlier this week in terms of somebody that was trying to trade for CeeDee Lamb. My worry there with that and trading for CeeDee Lamb in comparison was just remember how last year Justin Herbert getting that injury, right? And then the correlating injury that Keenan Allen had at the same time that wasn't as serious. If in theory they had been competing and in theory Justin Herbert was out there, we probably would have seen Keenan Allen back. But He wasn't. They shut him down. There was no need to. They were obviously in tailspin. And I worry that we might see a similar situation here with the Dallas offense. So just be very cautious when you're trading for assets with Dallas, just because right now is a little bit shaky there. If Dak is potentially shut down for the remainder of the fantasy season, I know we had some good times with Cooper Rush a couple years ago, but those were good random times. We can't count on that. We don't know what we're getting, so just be cautious, people. I see you dropping all the questions in the chat. Good Lord, they're starting to pile up. If I miss your question, feel free to ask it again because I'm not always looking at it and I have to kind of go back and forth here. So let's go ahead and take some questions first since you guys are all dropping those questions here. And then we'll go ahead and kind of talk about the running backs as well. And I see the follows on TikTok as well, so I appreciate it. I'm live on the Player Profiler YouTube channel and Twitter, and then my personal TikTok at It's Tera Time as well. Taking some questions here. Should I drop Kareem Hunt? No, absolutely not. I wouldn't. I know we have the prospect of Isaiah Pacheco coming back. We still don't know exactly what the exact timeline on that is. It's good news, obviously, that we could be getting him back, but at the same time, we look at Kansas City, right? Look at, where they are. They're undefeated. You got to kind of evaluate these teams from a position of, do they decide, okay, Kareem Hunt's getting it done. Do we really need to aggressively push Isaiah Pacheco back? I don't think so. We could get into a situation where, his activation mimics that of, let's say, TJ Hawkinson, right? Where Hawk was activated. And it took a couple of weeks before we actually saw him put onto the 53-man roster. So just kind of be cautious with that. Once the practice window is opened, doesn't necessarily mean that we would get Pacheco back immediately, especially when you consider just how well in general that Kansas City is doing. They want him to be fully ready to go. They don't want to rush him back before he's capable of, going at max speed, in my opinion. So be very cautious on that one. We'll get him back, but it might be a little bit later than we expect here. So no. And especially even when we do get him back, just FYI on that one, I would not be shocked at all if it is a timeshare. And that is not a negative on Pacheco. Again, that is potentially a load management thing because they are a playoff and a Super Bowl contending team needing to save him up for that moment there. So just keep that in mind. We might not see Kareem Hunt disappearing. They've been very strong in terms of volume recently. I've been pleasantly surprised at the amount of volume that Hunt's been getting on the ground. So there might be enough to go around there for both him and Pacheco to be fantasy relevant. Do I start CMC this week? Yes. I've already moved him into my starting lineups. Quite frankly, I know Kyle Shanahan is being rather coy about whether or not we are expecting him this week. It sounds like they on the contrary to, what I just said about Pacheco, it sounds like they are 100% comfortable with him and that he is at the point where he can come off of IR and immediately go into the starting lineup. We don't know for sure, right? But if he is active, we're absolutely playing him. Don't be cautious. Don't be overly cautious that first week. And remember, Jordan Mason has also been dealing with an injury as well. So while we could definitely see some kind of limited usage from him. We want Christian McCaffrey back into the lineup. So I have 2 Christian McCaffrey leagues. He has been moved into my lineup already. We're rolling with it. You got to. Think about Puka Nacua when he came back. People were cautious. They didn't put him into the starting lineup. You regretted that decision, right? So these superstars, when they're active, we play them. Brock Purdy or Joe Burrow? Joe Burrow is the one that I would go with. I do like Brock this week a ton. Brock is QB6 for me this week against Tampa Bay, but Joe is QB4 for me. I like this matchup with him against Baltimore. Expect points to fly. I would just go ahead and start Joe Burrow for sure over. They're both solid options, but Joe is what I would go with. Oh, feelings on Jonathan Brooks. You know what? Jonathan Brooks. Let's talk about Jonathan Brooks and Chuba Hubbard, because Chuba was actually one of the guys that was also in that article that I mentioned about the running backs, the late round running backs for Yahoo. So we can talk about that a little bit there. Chuba Hubbard and Jonathan Brooks, the backfield that is going to be potentially a little bit weird for us heading into the season. Hold up. Okay, go tell daddy. Go tell daddy. Sorry. Okay, go tell daddy, buddy. Sorry about that. I should have locked the door to this office. I knew better than that. All right, let's get back to Chuba Hubbard there. Before we had that little podcast interruption, talking about Jonathan Brooks finally being activated. It's weird to me that Brooks was activated literally just like 2 hours before he needed to be activated. The last minute chance. I don't really know what Carolina's hesitation was. That's what kind of makes me a little bit nervous about it, right? Because you don't really know what Carolina's hesitation was in waiting. Like, were they really that back and forth to where they were considering right up until the last minute, like, do we actually want to activate this guy? Do we want to give him the entire year off? It does make you wonder a little bit here. At the same time, I was very heading into the season, and this is like why with fantasy analysts, you can't have take lock, right? So heading into the season, I was very much so, all right, love Jonathan Brooks. We're going to be 4 games in. He's going to, be on the pup, come off 4 weeks in, ease in a couple of weeks here. So back half of the fantasy season, we'll get him and he'll, have a whole lot of upside within this offense here in Carolina. And I believe that there was really, really fantasy upside for the running back in Carolina. I was right about the upside for the running back in Carolina. I was just wrong about the fact that they duped me on how long that Jonathan Brooks was going to be out, unfortunately. So when you're looking at this offense and the fact that we're so deep into the season, we're heading into week 10, where we've got Carolina who they know that they have zero prospect of being able to turn things around this season and be competitive. So when you're looking at it from that perspective, do they really have an incentive to push an aggressive workload on Jonathan Brooks? I don't feel like that's the case anymore. Earlier in the season, when there might have been ambiguity and they were feeling like they wanted to be competitive, yeah, absolutely, right? That's why they made that switch to Andy Dalton, because they thought like, hey, we need to do something and spark a win. But at this point, I don't get the feeling that that is a reality for them, and they know that, right? So I still feel like Chuba Hubbard is going to be the lead back in this offense for the remainder of the season. They'll ease Jonathan Brooks back in, give him some carries there. It might look more like the way that we've had utilization for the other rookies, like Trey Benson is a good one who just really wasn't getting usage earlier in the season because they had a stable veteran that could handle the workload here. So I'm holding on to Brooks in the couple of leagues that I have him, because it makes no sense to have held on to him this long and you drop him right now. You got to give it a couple of weeks. This week right here, it will obviously be disappointing. There won't be a significant workload. And then in week 11, you're again going to give it a little bit of time there to, and I say week 11, let me just verify, because off the top of my head, week 11 would be, they have a bye week. So then it would be week 12 that we'd potentially be looking at, decent usage for him. It's bleak, unfortunately. Brooks is not somebody that I would want to trade for right now. If you can potentially trade him and get value out of him, it would be fine. But this is not a fantastic situation. Carolina waited till a very weird moment here to where we're not going to get much fantasy usage out of him. Maybe we can see some uptick in volume for the fantasy playoffs. But I don't feel super good about Jonathan Brooks. And I do think that you need to hold on to Chuba Hubbard as a potential guy that will have continued late season value for you for this exact reason. Such a weird situation here, but that's where we're at. Let's answer a few more questions here. That's a good one. I like this one from Jason Hall. I'm going to show this one. Maybe because you guys are discussing I see, questions around the kickers here. Maybe Aubrey kicks more field goals, not less. And yeah, that's a potential here because it's possible. It's not as if Cooper Rush is a rookie that will get in here and just be wildly like a Spencer Rattler situation, right? So it's possible that we see this offense just move enough to where we can get more kicks for Aubrey. So I wouldn't bail out completely on him because there's ambiguity in there. Because we had somebody else asking in the chat, should I be looking to move on from Aubrey to Jake Moody? I wouldn't right now. I would give it a little bit of time just because there's still enough juice-ish left in this offense to be able to slightly move forward. We'll hold right now on Aubrey just to see how it kind of plays out, because it is possible that they have to be in a situation where it's Brandon Aubrey kicking a bunch of 50-yard field goals, right? They get close enough, can't get into the red zone. It could be that kind of situation for sure. Let's see. Oh, I like this one. Let me go back to the top here. We had a question initially asked here over on YouTube. Thoughts on Khalil Herbert and how do we see this split backfield? And that is actually perfect for talking about the Chase Brown's fantasy value moving forward. That said, before I dive into that, I think we'll go ahead and take a little bit of a commercial break here for you guys, and then we'll come back here and talk about Chase Brown and Khalil Herbert right after we hear a word from our sponsors.
Oh, every week I'm answering these start-sit questions on Sunday morning. I go to the weekly rankings on playerprofiler.com just to make sure that my instincts are correct, and sometimes they're not. And guess what? More often than not, I go with the projections. You may not feel great about starting Daniel Jones or Wan'Dale Robinson, but the projections say, hey, that's the move. It may not feel right, but you use those projections to get it right. That's the power of the Player Profiler system. It's Evan Ringler, it's Bradley Stalder, it's Theo Greminger, of course, it's Billy Muzio making these rankings possible. The season rankings, so you know who to pick up, who to trade for. The Dynasty rankings are part of this. The offensive line rankings from Dan Fornick, one of the best in the business. Then we get our cornerback rankings, which show which corners are matched up with which wide receivers. And now, in collaboration with the IDP show, we have IDP rankings. Did you know that? Did you? So go to playerprofiler.com, use promo code PODFATHER. Get you 25% off the player rankings package right now at playerprofiler.com. Enjoy!
All right, we are back. We are back live, and we were going to kind of pivot off of that question about Khalil Herbert cutting into Chase Brown's workload here and talk about Chase Brown, who has been finally ascended to everything that I have wanted to be. Like, I won't bury the lead here. If you follow me in any way, shape, or form, you know that I've been a Chase Brown truther. It has existed for a while now. This is not brand new information. I had, in Dynasty, this was one of my favorite people to draft in rookie drafts. Last year, drafted a good bit of him late round. Obviously, that didn't pan out because of the injuries that happened and limited early usage. But finally, we're getting this Chase Brown workload that I have been dreaming of. Literally, I say dreaming of for so long. It's fantasy football, and he's literally a second-year player. So what? I've been dreaming of it for like 2 years here. But hey, I've been dreaming, and finally we're getting it. Unfortunately, it's being propped up, obviously, with Zach Moss being out indefinitely here. We'll be without him. It sounds like for the remainder of the season, unfortunately, with a neck injury. And I hate that so much, just because I don't know about you guys, but when I hear neck injury, for a running back, I get like the Chris Carson triggers right there, and I get worried, right? Because when Chris Carson got that neck injury, and all of a sudden we're like, oh yeah, he'll be out, indefinitely. He's never gonna play again. Yeah, that was so bad. So I'm hoping that's not the case for Zach Moss, and that everything is okay with him. But his absence last week obviously was a tremendous workload for Chase Brown, and he delivered in every single aspect that he could have. 27 carries, workload. Oh my gosh. 120 yards on the ground, caught all 5 of his targets for 37 yards and a touchdown. It was everything that a girl dreams of. I'm literally closing my eyes right now if you're listening to the podcast, because it's just like, everything I could have hoped for. He took full advantage of that struggling Raiders defense. It was a good matchup here. And I know, people say be cautious of good matchups. When I see good matchups and players performing in good matchups, like, I want to reward them. That's exactly what I want to see from them. So he gave me everything that I wanted. Volume, receptions, usage, touchdowns. It was everything. It was a clear sign of the hefty workload was also a clear sign of the Bengals coaching staff and the confidence that they have in him. The Khalil Herbert trade does make sense, though. It makes a lot of sense. And I know there are a lot of Khalil Herbert truthers out there. I'm not going to lie. If you scroll my Twitter, you'll find I was the exact opposite. I've made quite a few jokes about him and David Montgomery, because I was always on David Montgomery's side over there. That was always my boy, who I just felt was just dragged for no reason. He's such a strong, steady back that just continues to get dragged by people for no reason. But again, sorry, yeah, it's a Green Bay shirt. I came dressed in my Packers garb today. I don't know. Usually I'm agnostic, but I was feeling kind of Green Bay today. It's really old. It's literally got it at the last Super Bowl, so it's quite aged. But yeah, Zach Moss being out opened up all the opportunities in the world for Chase Brown here. This trade for Khalil Herbert, though, we got to remember sometimes and kind of temper our expectations. This is a guy who, him being put on the back burner for DeAndre Swift did make sense, right? Swift, I think we can all admit, is the superior back there. Right. He's electric. He is a smaller back in terms of stature. And so sometimes he doesn't have that power back capabilities, but at the same time, 3-down capable workload. And then the decision for them to increase workload in terms of goal line touches and short yardage specifically for Roschon Johnson in preference over Khalil Herbert. I think that tells us a lot. Right. And this was not something that they did in order to reduce workload on Herbert in order to prime him up for a trade. They did this a long time ago. This was just them really preferring both Swift and Roschon Johnson. So the idea that Herbert is going to be traded and be the lead back in Cincinnati seems a little bit far-fetched because the entire reason that Cincinnati felt comfortable with moving on from Joe Mixon was because they loved Chase Brown, right? So when we're looking at him and that split that he had with Zach Moss was getting a lot of third down work, right? So saying that Khalil Herbert is going to be a 1-for-1 replacement at that, I don't think that's really a strong reality, unfortunately, because that's not a strength in any way, shape, or form for Khalil Herbert. Khalil Herbert can't do third down work. So maybe he gets some early down touches there. But I still think the vast majority of the workload is going to be with Chase Brown. This is not a situation where I feel like, you need to prepare for selling him or anything like that, or panic by any means on this. Chase Brown is still the guy that I feel like will be the lead back in this offense here. When you look at the Cincinnati backfield, it's very clear they've not made any kind of how do I say this? They've made it obvious, right, that they don't like any of the other backs in their offense. I say that with kindness, right? We've got Travion Williams, Chris Evans. I almost said Chris Brown. Chris Evans as well, the other Chris Evans. And they haven't given those guys touches. They have seen those guys for years now. These are not new backs. Their depth that they don't want to touch the ball, quite frankly. So adding Khalil Herbert was an absolute necessity because they had to have someone else in that backfield because they don't want any of those other backs to spell Chase Brown. So we're still feeling confident in Chase Brown. It's just, there's going to be enough there to take a decent amount of workload off of him so that he's not massively overused, if that makes sense. So we're not panicking here. Let's answer some more questions here. Let's go. We've talked about a lot of running backs. Let's go on a little hot streak here in answering the live questions here. I'll save this one up because Tony Pollard. Okay, we'll save the Tony Pollard question here from Jason. I see your question about Tony Pollard getting fewer touches. I'll save that one a little bit and then double back to it because Pollard is one of the guys that I wanted to talk about here. Let's see. Are we picking up Trey Lance? Of course you are. Yeah. We are in deeper leagues and super flex. Yeah. And if there's any dynasty leagues where he isn't roster, I don't know. I feel like in most of my leagues, people have held on to him. Everybody's let go of Zach Wilson, but I feel like people are still kind of hanging on with hope with Trey Lance. So if he's out there and he's available, by all means do it. I do think it's a reality that we might see Trey Lance because we know that. And it's a weird situation because they've paid Dak. So it's not as if they have to look towards the future. But the reality is that are they ever going to be able to get trade value out of Cooper Rush? Probably not. Could you put Trey Lance out there, see what he's got, drum up some talk? Maybe he comes out there and looks good. I don't know that that's going to be the case, but maybe it happens. And we drum up some kind of trade value for him, and Dallas can get back some of those fourths that they keep trading. I'm sorry, Dallas. I don't mean to make fun of you. I cannot believe they traded a fourth for Jonathan Mingo. What was that? Jerry. What are we doing here? Yeah, you can pick him up because I do think that at some point in deeper leagues, obviously in Superflex, at some point, yeah, I do think we will potentially see Trey Lance on the field for them to try and trot him out and see what he has and if they can get a little bit of trade value for him or if he's a viable guy to keep on their roster as a backup there. Especially in Superflex leagues, it's never a bad thing to get ahead of the game. So that way you're not spending a ridiculous amount of fab on picking up these backup quarterbacks. I did that with Jameis Winston in a league. My Scott Fishbowl team, by the way, Scott Fishbowl team, I am officially in the playoffs now. So yay. That is my that is my Kyron Achan team. So it's eating, right? It's also got Pollard. Drafted the running backs well in that one. But it's good to be ahead of the game on some of these things. Like, I picked up Jameis Winston, maybe 2-3 weeks ahead of the Deshaun Watson injury, just in anticipation. So you pick these guys up for nothing. So anticipate that Trey Lance is going to be, potentially starting at some point. So if you're in a nice little super flex league and you want to go ahead and grab that one on the cheap, yeah, I would not mind doing that at some point. Chase Brown, Hubbard, Tracy, pick 2, half PPR. My preference there is Chase Brown and Tracy. Chase Brown has I don't like the matchup, obviously. It's not a good matchup here. I don't mind still rolling him out based on a pure volume play here and the fact that there will be goal line opportunities, and especially because I don't think that there's any way that we get significant contribution. Even if for some reason we do eventually get significant contribution from Khalil Herbert, it can't be this week right here. That is way too quick of a turnaround here. So I think this is still going to be an aggressive volume play for Chase Brown. So I'm okay with going with Brown and Tracy as well, like the matchup for Tracy this week. Zay or Pickens? I lean towards Zay Flowers this week. Again, this one is another one where I'm okay with the matchup here. Deontay Johnson should get an uptick in volume. So it'll be interesting to see how that is, how he's utilized in this offense for sure. But we're still rolling with Zay for sure. Good question here. Do I think that Devin Singletary still has a chance? I think that they have moved on, unfortunately, and that Tracy, I feel confident in Tracy's workload in this backfield. I'm ranking him as such as the lead back. There's no kind of hesitation there for me. That said, he is a rookie. We do know that, this is the time period where we want to be rostering high upside handcuffs, right? So Singletary is a high upside handcuff, even in a bad Giants offense, just based off what we know about Singletary and his capabilities, right? Thank you for the rose. Appreciate it. But yeah, just kind of looking overall at this offense as a whole, Singletary still has upside if he were to become the starter again, but I think he's lost the job, quite frankly. Oh, good question. Stroud or Knicks this week? My preference is Knicks. Unless we get Nico back. Now that would be the key delineating factor right there. If we get Nico Collins back this week, I could go Nico over Bo Nix. I don't mind Knicks this week, to be honest. It's not an ideal matchup. It's a bad situation for him. Might not be a ton of volume, but quite frankly, the volume that he has on the ground, I'm okay with it, right? The rushing upside counteracts his lack of passing volume in a bad matchup here. So Stroud has just been a complete mess, unfortunately. If we get Nico back, I can make that pivot, but I'm not getting any kind of really tip-offs from the Texans here in terms of feeling confident in Nico's potential return this week. So they're holding that one close to the chest, closer than we've seen from Kyle Shanahan on CMC. So that one is a weird one for me, for sure. Let's see here. Puka or down. Sorry, I can never scroll properly through the comments on TikTok. That's probably an age thing. Puka or downs. Puka for sure. Again, when he initially came back from that injury, workload was fantastic, even on a limited snap count there. So I expect him to have a strong bounce back this week. I like the potential for volume in this matchup here for sure. So I do like both Puka and Cup. Puka is still a top 10 guy for me this week, provided he doesn't punch anybody. Amari Cooper for Mike Evans. Yeah, I would make that trade for sure. If you are in a position where you don't need Evans to start now, because I think we still might have a couple of weeks, but I anticipate we might have a couple more weeks for him. I know they don't want to rush him back. They rushed him back before. The hamstring popped up as a little bit of an injury. They rushed him back. It didn't work out, obviously, made it worse. So I don't anticipate them rushing back. My thought process is that he would be back after the bye week. But if you don't need him right now, if you're a strong team, you're a strong contender, you're heading to the playoffs here, Amari Cooper wasn't a start for you anyway, I would 100% make that move. I like that trade for you for sure. Who do you like better rest of season? Oh, good question here. McBride or Bowers? Honestly, it's Bowers for me. I like McBride, but unfortunately, what I don't like is the volume for Kyler Murray in that offense. And I don't feel like it's his fault. It's a coaching decision. And you know what? Hey, they've been doing better lately. The run game is thriving, so I don't blame them on that direction there. That's their choice. But from a fantasy perspective, it's not working out for us, unfortunately. So when I'm looking at him and at him being Trey McBride in that context of the Arizona offense, yeah, we're going to get volume. Touchdown opportunities are not going to be there for him. We knew that kind of heading into the season that he's a volume guy, but the volume isn't high enough for me to kind of rank him over Bowers rest of the season. So I lean towards Bowers. It's weird how I like Bowers and Jacoby Myers in that offense for the Raiders. Yeah, I guess I like two Raiders. I don't feel good about saying that when they literally have a terrible offense and a highly questionable quarterback situation. But the targets are very consolidated. It's just him and Bowers, and they have no run game. So it is what it is, and they're both very usable from a fantasy perspective. That was another one of my hits last week. Jacoby Myers. Yeah. Comment from Uncle Ted. Keaton Mitchell is a must add. Yeah, I think it's, and yes. That one is another one that I feel like we might not, if you've got a deeper bench, for sure. That one is a strong add here. We might see him potentially, eased back in because Justice Hill is working out so well with that third down work. But we know that Keaton can handle that third down work there. So, and we know that it's viable and productive from a fantasy perspective. Every single week I'm looking at my rankings and I'm like, I just keep moving Justice Hill up higher and higher because the volume is there. It's working out. So yeah, Keaton Mitchell is somebody who could offer standalone fantasy value for sure. Let's go back to this Tony Pollard question because that is the namesake of the show this week. These running backs that are thriving here. We had a question from Jason Hall. Are you worried will be given fewer touches down the stretch. The team apparently has hinted this, and Spears will be back. Yeah, we got the load management comment from the Titans, and the way that and I took that a different way. And I feel like the reason that I took that a different way is because I kind of last week, Tony Pollard was one of my favorite starts of the week, and I got a little bit of pushback. I'm not gonna lie, I got a little bit of pushback from people that were like, "How are you leaning so aggressively into someone that hasn't practiced all week?" And my kind of feedback on that one is that sometimes every single season, there are specific guys that straight up do not practice. Think back to Josh Jacobs, not last season, but the season before when he led I can't remember if he led the league. I think he led the league in rush attempts. And that was his, career best season and whatnot. The outrageous workload, right? And what we saw that season from him is we saw a ton of load management because he was getting a ton of touches. And the way that they managed his workload was he just didn't practice all week. He never, there got to a point where he was questionable every single Friday, questionable throughout the week, every single week, never practicing, not even just a limited basis, just straight up was not practicing at all. And I feel like that's where we might be at with Tony Pollard. Now, granted, kind of take that as a tip that if we get a strong workload finish from Tony Pollard, remember that for next year, that might be a guy that you might not want to invest in because the guy's coming off of those aggressive workloads next season doesn't work out. That's a little side note. But for this season, when they're talking about load management, I don't feel like they're talking about giving a equal share to Tyjae Spears. I think it's more of an explanation as to why he is not practicing and not to panic over that. So he's going to be listed, and every single week, in my opinion, he's going to be listed as dealing with some kind of injury. He won't be practicing, or he'll be limited at the very best, and just kind of don't panic over that. He's still going to play. I think he's just going to be that guy this season, so I'm not particularly worried about him. Talking a little bit more about Tony Pollard here, because the volume that he has been extremely, extremely strong. And it will be good to get Tyjae Spears back and get a little bit of that taken off. But he's been very productive, right? In terms of that, the utilization that he's had, being efficient, everything considered with the quarterback situation as well. This week, he had 28 carries, 128 yards. He's getting that receiving work as well. He's just got heavy usage that gives him that constant borderline RB1 upside outcome. And I think it sticks. It's working out very well. Tyjae Spears will be a nice complement to him. But at this point, I feel very confident that this is Tony Pollard's backfield. And I honestly don't mind. Maybe he is a solid trade target, to be quite frank. If people are a little bit worried about the comments that were come out about the load management, and maybe you can use that to your advantage, because when I'm looking ahead to his playoff schedule, weeks 13, which is not playoff schedule, but weeks 13 through week 17, Pollard faces Washington, Jacksonville twice, Cincinnati, and Indianapolis. That is, you could not ask for a better fantasy playoff schedule. The only thing in there that is shaky is that Washington matchup, just because they've been improving significantly, but really they've been improving against the pass. They're still a fine matchup against running backs. So quite frankly, Tony Pollard is someone that is a solid trade candidate for me. Kind of use that fear of Tyjae Spears coming back, use the fear of the reduction in his workload to your advantage, buy potentially low on him just because of perception. And I think you can get a solid RB1 at a very reasonable price. Really do like that prospect of Tony Pollard and what he offers. Oh, good question from Trevor. McBride or Gesicki? So I was very, very heavy on Gesicki last week. That was another hit. I guess I'm tooting my own horn this episode. It was a good week. It was a good week. Gesicki comes down to not Trey McBride. Gesicki comes down to T. Higgins being out. It's very clear. I talked about this last week and why I like Mike Gesicki exclusively when T. Higgins is out. Because Gesicki is not a real tight end. He's a big wide receiver. T. Higgins is a big wide receiver. That's a super easy plug and play for them. They can use him in a very similar way and not have to make major adjustments to their offense. So it makes complete sense that Mike Gesicki is strong when T. Higgins is out. So Gesicki's value this week 100% depends on whether or not T. Higgins is out. So again, McBride is the one that I will have ranked higher for sure. Gesicki is not a bad play if T. Higgins is out. McBride is just the safer option to you for you to go with for sure, even in a difficult matchup. Let's get some more questions. Oh, Gesicki. Oh, nice. Got another Gesicki question. Gesicki or Hunter Henry at tight end? I would absolutely go Gesicki again, provided that T. Higgins is out, easily over Hunter Henry. Harrison Jr. or Sutton this week. Will Harrison Jr. ever show up? Yeah, that is the question. And again, I kind of talked about Arizona's offense when I talked about Trey McBride earlier. That is 100% an issue of the lack of volume of Arizona, unfortunately. So when we're looking at Marvin Harrison Jr., it's just a situation where we got to accept that his production is going to be volatile, touchdown dependent, and low volume, unfortunately. We've seen some better usage from him in, recent weeks, but it's still just a very touch and go situation. I like Sutton this week as a sneaky option there. And again, Kansas City's defense it's not an ideal matchup overall, but if there's a way to attack them, it's through the air. That's the preference there compared to on the ground where you just can't get any leeway around them. Wide receivers have done decently well. Sutton is being hyper targeted there. And it's been beautiful. I'm glad they finally figured that out because they've had some weird usage of him earlier in the season and misconnections there. But him and Bo Nix really seem to be clicking there. So I like that matchup there for them to kind of supply good volume to Courtland Sutton. So despite the fact that it's Kansas City, I still like Courtland Sutton as a solid wide receiver too this week for sure. Oh, trade Connor for Brian Thomas Jr. If you're safe at running back and you can afford to lose Connor, I don't mind that trade at all, for sure. I expect an uptick in volume from Brian Thomas, but it's still a shaky situation. We saw the uptick in volume last week go directly to Evan Ingram. That was expected because, again, when you're kind of looking at these athletic tight ends, right, they often benefit specifically from a wide receiver going out. So this year and last year, very clearly, when Evan Ingram steps up in the opportunity when Christian Kirk goes down, it's a very high volume opportunity, right? Those two just kind of conflict, right? They don't go well together in the offense. So one has to give. And with Christian Kirk out, we're going to see an uptick in volume. And we saw that last week with 10 targets for Mike Gesicki, getting my tight ends confused right now. 10 targets for Evan Ingram last week. He only caught 5 of them. I didn't get a chance to look at how actual usable those targets were. Were they poor passes? Were they actual catchable balls that he missed? Were there drops from him? I'm not sure. But the fact that he got 10 targets was an excellent sign. Brian Thomas Jr. has to see more volume. We can't keep living off of these 4 or 5 target games for him and hoping that we're getting touchdowns. So we want to see the increase in volume for him, but I don't mind taking that chance on him because the talent has absolutely shown. So if you're solid at running back and you can afford it, I don't mind it. If Nico Collins does play, Legette or Jennings? I don't know if I get that question about, I'm assuming that if Nico Collins plays, then you're just deciding between Legette and Jennings. My preference would be a healthy Jennings for sure. But if you have to go with Legette, I don't think it's a terrible thing. DJ Moore or Demario Douglas? DJ Moore for sure. Demario Douglas has been a little bit frustrating for me because New England's receiving core has been weird. Their usage of Kayshon Boutte has been peculiar. Maybe they see something in him. Maybe he's developed a little bit and they've got some additional trust in him. I don't know. When I look at that receiving core, I thought it would go 1,000 different directions, but that's where they're at right now. In volume two, Douglas has been a little bit shaky there, unfortunately. So my preference is DJ Moore, even though unfortunately we are getting, and I say unfortunately for Moore, we are getting an uptick in volume from for Rome Odunze there. So that's something that we need to monitor, because we could be on the verge of seeing this kind of back half breakout for Rome Odunze too. So very interesting. Trade question. I traded Marv, DJ Moore, Caleb for May, Dell, and Dobbs. In a 2 QB league. I think it's very even. I do think that for sure May does have more upside for sure. So you're definitely getting more, and that's just kind of, Caleb is fine, but I think there are still kinks that they have to work out in that offense. They can rely on the run game as well. There's just a little bit more, how do I say this? Their defense is great as well, so they don't have to push volume aggressively. New England is not in the same position. May is, pushing a decent amount of volume there. Even though there's turnovers and whatnot, he's got the rushing upside. So things kind of work out decently well for May. With Stephon Diggs out for the season, that also gets an uptick in volume for Dell as well. So I don't mind that trade for you, honestly. Darnold, Stafford. Ooh, good question here. Darnold, Stafford, May, or Knicks this weekend. I already talked about the fact that I do like Knicks, but I don't like him over Stafford or Darnold. My preference there is Darnold. I do expect them to be able to take advantage of this Jacksonville defense, kind of have a field day there. We should have more involvement from TJ Hawkinson as well. So I like Sam Darnold this week. He is my QB7. QB7 right now. That could go back 1 or 2, but he's still a solid top 10 quarterback for me. Good question here. A kicker question. Moody coming off of IR. Have to keep him or the Chargers kicker? Look, I've tried to remain optimistic. I've tried to remain optimistic about the Chargers kicker. But it's been a little bit shaky there just because the volume hasn't been consistent. You do sometimes get an uptick of volume in good matchups, but he does have a little bit of lack of upside there. So I kind of lean towards keeping Moody and dropping Dicker. I know Dicker the kicker. Yeah, I lean towards Moody. Because even Anders Carlson was doing well in that offense. And we know how suspect he was with Green Bay last year. So, hey, I think the kicker that you want to stick with is San Francisco. That's the way I would lean. My RBs are CMC, Kamara, JT with lackluster wide receivers. Trade JT and Deontay for AJ Brown and Sutton. Oh, yeah, I would definitely do that. I like that trade for you. Yeah. And those are the two and JT is the one that I would trade. Oh, I really like that for you. For sure, Logan. JT is the one that I would trade just because, again, so Jonathan Taylor, and I guess this is, the advantage of a mobile quarterback. When Jonathan Taylor was in with Anthony Richardson, he was getting all of those goal line opportunities. He just appeared to be more efficient. Statistics were better, more goal line opportunities. And with Joe Flacco, it's not really working out the same there. So yeah, if I was going to sell one of them, it would for sure be JT. CMC, we want to keep him. And then Kamara, Kamara is now the wide receiver one in that offense. So yeah, I love that trade for you. That's a good one. Crafty, I like it. Trade Cooper Kupp, Pitts, Jonathan Brooks for McBride, Dobbins, and Devontae. I am okay with that. Yeah, that's a fine trade. I still prefer Kupp to Adams for sure, but you're upgrading at all the other positions, so I can take a little bit of a hit there to upgrade significantly everywhere else. Speaking of JK Dobbins, that is the last running back that I was going to talk about in context for the show. For our topic of these late round running backs. JK Dobbins, right? The late round darling there. We got Gus Edwards coming off of IR. We don't know that he'll be back this week, but I honestly, quite frankly, I don't anticipate Dobbins' workload being at risk. Again, this is kind of a situation where he's handling good volume. He's being highly productive. He's got the goal line opportunities. He's a true 3-down back. And at this point, they have no reason to kind of want to reduce his volume, in my opinion. Loving what we're seeing from him. RB17 in average points per game. There's no downside to Dobbins at this point. The only, downside to Dobbins is that injury history, unfortunately. So you got to kind of hedge on that, but you don't panic over it, right? So I think rostering Dobbins at this point or trading for Dobbins at this point is solid. This is somebody who I love rest of the season. I don't think that Gus Edwards or Kamani Vidal is going to affect his potential workload there. So yeah, JK Dobbins is one for sure that we love. How high? Ooh, good question. How high are you on Tyrone Tracy this week specifically? And I want to be accurate for you. So I'm going to do to my rankings just to get the exact number is RB15 for him. And that'll stay pretty stable for me. RB15. I don't know. Let me check real quick. Am I above or below consensus? No, I'm right on consensus. RB15 is where everybody else has him as well. That's right after guys like James Cook, Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift, and before guys like James Conner, JK Dobbins, Kareem Hunt, David Montgomery. I do really love him in this matchup for sure. I do put Hall above him. I've got Breece Hall 6 spots ahead of him. Had to do a little math there. Arizona defensively hasn't been the layup that I think people kind of treat it as pass-wise. It's absolutely not something that, people are that teams are able to get a ton of volume on. On the ground, though, there's still not a bad matchup here. So I don't mind this matchup for Breece Hall. It's okay. And at the same time, this is a good matchup for him in terms of his pass volume or his receptions volume as well. So I think this will be an okay day on the ground with a decent amount of workload through the air as well. So I do have Breece Hall higher than Tyrone Tracy this week, but I do like Tyrone Tracy as a top 15 back this week. Taysom Hill or Mike Gesicki this week. I have Taysom Hill ranked higher this week. Taysom is at tight end 7 for me. I honestly feel more comfortable with Taysom this week. And Gesicki I still like. He's still a borderline tight end 1 for me. An excellent streaming option. I could go back and forth on starting Gesicki over a guy like Jake Ferguson, maybe even a Sam Laporta. But Taysom Hill, we know for sure that Chris Olave is not going to play this week. He just got, he's seeing a specialist. We're not going to see him this week. So expecting any of those other wide receivers to step up and contribute significantly, no. I think the beauty of Taysom Hill this week and why I love him is we've got the rushing upside that he always have, but they have to use him as a receiver as well. We saw over the past couple of weeks, especially last week, he got an uptick in targets as well. He never sees targets. They're going to be relying on him and Alvin Kamara here. So both of these guys getting significant bumps up from the injuries to the wide receivers this week. Would you start Murray or Patrick Mahomes this week? I would start... I lean towards Patrick Mahomes. I've got him ranked 2 spots higher. I think I might have shown 3. It's 2 spots higher there. And it's an uncomfortable ranking for me because it's not an ideal matchup, right, for either one of these guys. But I do at least feel like Patrick Mahomes will be able to get a decent amount of volume to Travis Kelce. With Kyler Murray, I get worried that everyone might be shut down in that matchup, unfortunately. The Jets defense looked better, much better last week. Now, granted, that was against a depleted Houston offense. At the same time, though, I do worry that this is going to be an aggressive ground game for Arizona. We're going to see a lot of James Conner and potentially the other running backs there. So, I just get worried that this is not going to be a good situation for Murray. Mahomes is probably the more stable option here, even in the bad matchup. Well, let's start a couple more questions here, and then I got to go. We also got to talk about Tony Pollard here, by the way. Thank you for the comment here. I'm going to show this one. Equating with Gesicki is crazy. And then the love it comment. Yeah. It's wild. It's and I like to consider myself a pioneer on that topic because I've heard a lot of people saying that stuff this week, but I was the one that was saying it a couple weeks ago. So, hey, not to toot my own horn there, because I know I was not the first person to say that. I'm sure I'm not the originator of that, but we were early on that for sure. We were early on that, not waiting before it hit. We were predicting it ahead of time, right? Let's talk about Tony Pollard real quick, though. No, we talked about Tony Pollard. We talked about Chase Brown. I just want to make sure that we hit on all the running backs that we were supposed to. Rico, JK Dobbins, Chuba Hubbard. Okay, perfect. We hit on all of our late round running backs that are, performing so well, whether or not we trust them moving forward. I mean, we're feeling generally positive. We didn't talk about Rico though, but that's because, we touched on it a little bit just because of the Dak situation, potentially hurting his workload, making him overall lack in efficiency. But other than that, man, these running backs have just been outstanding in the progression that they have made this season. So you'll love to see it. You'll love to see it for those of you who were hero RB or zero RB. As long as you hit on anybody and everybody but Zamir White, we're feeling good right now, right? Couple more questions and then we're going to close things out here. McBride or Otton played both last week, but now get CMC back. Got 2 wide receivers on a bye, so only have Johnson to play. Should I drop him and pick up Quentin Johnston, Keenan Allen, or Wan'Dale Robinson? I assume that's Deontay. No. And I hate that for you. And yeah, because now you've got a limitation of wide receivers, and now you got to pick and choose between McBride and Cade Otton. I would play Cade Otton over McBride for sure. We got to believe in the volume for Cade Otton. He's been fantastic. He's Baker's wide receiver 1. That ain't changing anytime soon. You guys, I talked about it last week, the week before. I'm all in on Cade Otton moving forward. And have been. Let's go, Cade Otton. But in terms of whether or not you want to pick up Quentin Johnston, Keenan Allen, or Wan'Dale Robinson, I would hate for you to drop Deontay Johnson and wait. Maybe I'm missing. You might need to answer that again, or you might need to ask that again. I might be misunderstanding that question, quite frankly. I'm not sure which one you're trying to drop. Let's answer somebody else's question while I see if maybe we get some more details on that. Just made this trade before week 9. Receive Matt Stafford, Rico Dowdle, George Pickens, trade away, Jalen Warren, Bryce Young, Keon Coleman, in a 2025 round 5. Thoughts on Pickens? I like that for you, to be quite frank. I'm a fan of that. Again, I'm trusting that Russ has got the job moving forward. The connection with Russ and George Pickens is excellent, right? That's the type of wide receiver that Russell loves. And we do have Mike Evans coming in. That's another receiver that obviously meshes very well with how Russ likes to play. So I like that Pittsburgh is really kind of making things kind of mesh here. But I like that trade for you. Stafford rest of season with both his receivers. Dowdle obviously has the concerns there with the lack of production, potentially with Dak out, but I would absolutely rather roster Dowdle over Jalen Warren for sure. And George Pickens, I am absolutely trusting him rest of season. So I like that trade for you for sure. Oh, okay. So answering the question about dropping Deontay Johnson for Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnston, or Wan'Dale Robinson. I don't trust the volume for Wan'Dale Robinson, quite frankly. We didn't see Darius Slayton get traded. We thought that was maybe a possibility. We heard that Pittsburgh was looking into Darius Slayton. So that is interesting because that would have made sense as well. But my preference there would still be to hold on Deontay and see how he works out. I mean, you're just kind of looking at that, and it's the guy in the best offense for sure. It's just kind of looking at the guy in the best offense for sure. With the Ravens, you got Lamar Jackson throwing to you. He has been getting the pass volume has been fine. So I would still give it a little bit before I went dropping Deontay for a guy like Quentin Johnston. That's the only one that I would maybe look at, just because Johnston has had a little bit more in terms of fantasy production, but it just hasn't been very dependable. A lot of busted coverage. Can't trust Keenan Allen. So yeah, stick it out with Johnston for now, or Johnson for now. Start 2, Sutton, Hopkins, Smith, Dell, Brian Thomas Jr. Sutton is such, so Sutton, I already talked about, for sure. We might have to monitor Smith though. That's one that we got to monitor. You might, he's dealing with a hamstring injury, which was peculiar, right? Because I was, heading into the week, we were a little bit worried about AJ Brown and whether or not, how significant that knee injury was. AJ Brown was limited at practice, and Devonta Smith was not practicing at all with a hamstring injury. So we're kind of, I don't know. That one kind of worries me a little bit, something to kind of monitor there. Smith is obviously, if he's healthy, I would 100% wanting to start him. And then Tank Dell is also kind of dependent on Nico Collins. But for right now, I lean towards the way that I would go is Smith and Dell. If we get any kind of, continued injury concerns with Smith, potentially any limitations, just go ahead and go with Sutton and Dell. And it's fine because you don't have to make those decisions right now. Amon-Ra or DeAndre Swift at flex. I would still go with Amon-Ra. Patrick Mahomes or Kirk Cousins. I have Cousins ranked higher this week. We'll do a little rapid fire here before we close things out. Do we think that Nico Collins is going to play this week? If I'm 50-50 on that one, I'm leaning on the -50 side, quite frankly. I'm not feeling good about it. Should I start Kittle and Cade same week? Yes, 100%. I am pro flexing. I'm pro flexing tight ends, the right tight ends, and Kittle and Cade Otton are two of those guys for sure. I flexed Cade Otton for the past 2 weeks. I'm going to continue to do so. Ain't nobody stopping me on that one. We're moving forward with that. And Kittle is a must start rest of season. Both of them, honestly, tight end one upside, producing top 10 wide receiver numbers. So yeah, roll both of them out for sure. 3 wide receiver, PPR, bench, Charbonnet and Roschon Johnson. Oh, bench, you have Charbonnet and Roschon Johnson. Drop either one to grab Pearsall. Yeah. For your wide receiver 5, because Waddle has been a bust. Yeah, and I'm concerned about Waddle moving forward as well. Because by no means are we dropping Waddle. You're still holding him on your bench for sure. But you need to make some contingency plans, and Pearsall is a good idea. So yeah, I would drop Roschon for Pearsall. That would be my preference. I would keep Charbonnet just because both Swift and Kenneth Walker have injury history issues. But I kind of lean towards trusting the potential for Charbonnet a little bit more, just because we've seen it in action, right? When Kenneth Walker went down earlier and the upside was there. So Charbonnet is the one that I would want to roster. Drop Roschon for Pearsall. Yeah, I like that move. Mayfield or Wilson. I am starting Baker Mayfield. At this point, I'm headstrong on Baker, right? Baker is my QB 8 this week. I'm not stopping. Why would we stop with Baker? He's been fantastic. The volume has been there. The man finished his QB 15 last week, and that's kind of underselling it because quarterbacks scored oddly high last week. It was a very productive. Usually this week, based off previous weeks, 18 fantasy points is what Baker got. That would make you a solid, low-end QB1. Last week was a weird week. So that's still solid production. The man hasn't had below 18 fantasy points since week 4. Yeah, we're rolling with Baker. He's a little banged up. It is what it is, but Baker is how we're rolling. Couple more questions here. Garrett Wilson and Jerry Jeudy for CD. I wouldn't do that. Again, I talked about this one earlier. I am, look, if you want to do it, that's perfectly fine. I am highly skeptical. I don't know if you guys can see me. TikTok is making me verify that I'm still active because we went over an hour here. I'm still skeptical of what CD will be in this offense. Like, it could be okay with Cooper Rush, right? But we've got an extended absence for Dak Prescott, probably for the remainder of the fantasy season. That worries me significantly here for him. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm very skeptical of making trades for CD right now. Mahomes or Herbert this week? Off the top of I have them back to back. I have Patrick Mahomes as my QB 12 and Justin Herbert as my QB 13. So right now, Patrick Mahomes, but I'm not going to lie to you, that could flip as the week goes on. Tennessee's pass defense has been fine, so that's my only hesitation there. Honestly, I could flip it and go with Herbert over Patrick Mahomes. I don't have it ranked that way right now, but if I'm predicting how I'll feel as the week goes on, I'm probably going to end up being on the Herbert side of that. Should I try to trade Tyreek? If so, who should I get? No, I would not trade Tyreek. I like this week as a nice bounce back week for Tyreek. I love Tua this week for another potential strong finish. I love this matchup here with the LA Rams. I'm crossing my fingers that this is finally the shootout that we've been hoping to get here. So I would not trade Tyreek right now. Wait a week if you're, feeling uncomfortable with the volume. Wait a week, wait for this matchup, and trade him off of this, what should be an excellent matchup with the LA Rams. But that wraps things up for me, guys. It's been like an hour. We're gonna call it a day here on the podcast, which, by the way, if you're watching live, it is a podcast, right? So if you want to go back and listen to previous shows or anything, or if you just want to support me, that would be amazing. Make sure that you're subscribed to the Dear Miss Fantasy show on all podcast platforms. If you are not already subscribed, I would greatly appreciate it if you are watching live somewhere and you want to go and show a little bit of love. That would be amazing. Make sure that you're also subscribed to Player Profiler. We are the official mailbag show for Player Profiler. And if you're in the mood for more subscriptions, you can subscribe to me at It's Tera Time, ITSTERATIME on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, pretty much everywhere. Content all the time, right? That would be wonderful. I appreciate you guys tuning into the show. Your questions are always wonderful. You're an amazing audience, like literally on a weekly basis. So thank you so much for providing all the wonderful questions and sticking around with me during this wonderful show. Again, I will talk to you guys next week. I appreciate you all tuning in. Make sure that you're following me across all platforms so you can get notifications when I go live and whatnot. Good luck with your lineups. I hope that you all win, unless you're in one of my league mates watching. I hope that you don't win if you're playing me. Just FYI, because I'm petty like that. No, I'm kidding, slightly. But other than that, everybody, good luck with your lineups. I will talk to you again next week. If you have any other questions or if I miss anything, feel free to tag me. Twitter is always the best place to tag because I get the notifications directly and it's so easy to go to. But that wraps things up. I will talk to you guys again next week.